We've now got a good plan in place for how our database needs to function. The next step of the process is to start thinking about how to actually implement the plan in our relational database management system of choice. I've created a table design worksheet that you can print out for each of your tables identified in your data model to help keep track of the decisions and changes that we're going to make. These table design worksheets will help you out when it comes time to implement the design in the DBMS and will make up an important component of your database blueprint. The first step of that process is to be explicitly clear in how we're going to name the various tables and attributes that we're about to create. Proper naming of your tables and fields provides a sort of self-documenting feature of your completed system, such that they can aid someone that comes after you that needs to maintain your database, or even help you remember what it was that you were doing 6 months from now when you need to add a feature. First, check with your organization. They might already have settled on a standardized way to name things, and so the hard work has already been done for you. Just follow the guidelines provided. If that's not the case, and if you're working inside of an existing database system, explore the objects that are already there and see if you can determine what naming rules were previously put into place, if any. Ideally, you'll be able to easily recognize the pattern, and then you can simply carry forth and apply that same system to any objects you create. If neither of those cases apply, then it's up to you to make sure that your database uses a solid naming convention. To do this, we're going to focus on filling in the first column of the table design worksheet, which includes naming the tables and attribute fields that were previously identified for inclusion in our database. You'll want to print multiple copies of the worksheet so that each table in your design can be separated on its own page. When filling in the name columns, here are a couple things to keep in mind. The first rule of naming objects in your database is to be consistent. Nothing makes a database harder to decipher after it's built than to have things seemingly named at random. Pay attention to capitalization and decide on how you're going to use uppercase and lowercase letters. Some people prefer to name their tables in all uppercase letters. Others choose something called camel case, where words are pushed together with no spaces, and each new word starts with an uppercase letter. Choose a pattern that works for you and stick with it throughout the project. The second rule is to not use any special characters in your names, including spaces. Stick with alphanumeric characters and maybe a hyphen or underscore. You definitely want to avoid using any parentheses or bracket characters, as well as any of the characters that you access by pressing Shift plus a number key on your keyboard. These characters can interfere with the programs that run against your database, and trust me, you do not want to spend time troubleshooting strange behaviors in the system simply because a table had a stray asterisk in its name. Consider all of these characters off limits and you'll be a happier designer for it. The last thing to avoid when naming things is something called the reserved words for your particular database management system. Reserved words are words that have special meaning to the DBMS and can interfere with its operation. Often these are names of specific internal functions or data types that are meant to perform some specific operation against your database or define fields in a specific way. Words such as select or create can't be used as table names because they're operations that are meant to either select an existing table or create a new table. Imagine how confusing it would be to try and select the create table. Other words often make the reserved lists. Common words such as date, time, name, character, and group. There are actually hundreds of reserved words, and you'll thank me for not running through a complete list here. Check with your DBMS's help documentation using the key phrase reserved word, or search the web for a complete list for your system. Now, depending on the DBMS you're using, it will either flat out refuse to allow you to name an object with a reserved word, or it will strongly caution you against doing so, but it will still allow it. In my opinion, you should heed these warning messages and simply choose another name. Often there is a much better name anyway. For instance, instead of a field named date, consider how much clearer names such as start date or expiration date or birth date are. They instantly give you more information about the data anyway, and won't trigger any reserved word warnings. So those are the main naming rules. 1. Be consistent in whatever you choose and stick with it throughout the project, especially when it comes to capitalization. 2. Don't use any special characters. And 3. Avoid reserved words at all costs. So go through your data model, create a table design worksheet for each of your identified tables, and spend some time thinking carefully about the names each field will take in your completed data table. Once that is done, we can move on to the next column of the worksheet.